You're listening to the Amplify podcast, where we discuss topics related to being a student at the University of Michigan. Hey friends, thanks for tuning in again. This episode is going to be about politics. I know we just finished the election cycle, so the last thing anybody wants to do is talk about more of the same stuff, but don't worry. We aren't going to take you on a lecture or go too in the weeds. We just want to talk a little bit about what it was like voting and dealing with the election from a student perspective. So it's going to be a little bit more quality of life focused than just wrought political jargon. So don't click off just yet.
Yes. And as somebody who's not ever really been super involved in politics, and I'm definitely not an expert in politics, I will say, yeah, my intention here is not going to be to lecture you on like what political side you should be on so much as like talking about what it was like to dealing with the stress of the election and politics while also being a student and having so much work to do. So I don't know about all of you, but I know that when I could finally vote in a presidential election for the first time, I was super nervous. I didn't know where I was supposed to go or what I was supposed to do. And I did end up figuring it out. You know, I went to the Secretary of State website, which is pretty easy to navigate. And, you know, you can get your registration all in order there. And I went to my voting location and waited in line super anxiously because I was super sure that I was going to mess it up somehow. I'd never done it before. So I was like, am I missing something? Like what, I was nervous, honestly. And then I, went through the whole process, and actually it ended up not being as hard as I thought it was going to be. It ended up not taking as long as I thought it was going to take. And I got my little I voted sticker, and I felt really relieved. And, this was back in 2012 when I voted for Obama. That was the first presidential election that I was able to participate in. And yeah, again, I was just very confused. I was sure. I was like, am I really allowed to vote? Am I an adult now? And some of you, maybe this was your first election that you could vote in, and maybe you had similar experiences. I also recognize that because of the pandemic, your first voting experience might have been different from mine. And also, I want to just say that, my easy access to voting isn't the same for everyone. Some people do face a lot more obstacles to voting, and many of you might be international students or immigrants who cannot vote at all. So I want to recognize that, and also the impact that the presidential election and politics does have on international students and immigrants, and how it can be really frustrating to not be able to participate in a voting process that directly impacts you.
Yeah. And I know exactly what you're talking about with kind of all the confusion surrounding voting for the first time. I think my first voting experience was in 2018 during the midterms. It's a little bit, but yeah, no, actually back then it was really high stakes actually, because there's the whole blue wave and all that was supposed to happen. And just not knowing what I needed to bring or what I had to have with me was a little stressful. And I had to like talk to my dad. I'm like, okay, what do I get? What do I bring? But yeah, just kind of to touch a little bit on like that note that you mentioned about international students and people who aren't registered to vote because they can't register to vote for citizenship reasons or study abroad reasons or whatever. One of the things that's been really interesting talking to both friends that I have that aren't citizens, but also people that I know in other countries, is that just because like this is the American election, it's the president of the United States and everything, doesn't mean that like the decisions and the things that happen stop at our borders. There's ramifications for all the decisions that are made that echo throughout the world, especially with the United States specifically. And I know some people who were out in Italy, and we're talking to like Italians and stuff like that, and like there's like a lot of observation on the stuff that was happening in the States. People who are out in Germany, a lot of observation of the stuff that's happening in the States. People who were studying here who are like, I don't know if I'm going to stick around depending on how this pans
Yeah.
out. It's a high stress time for everybody, regardless of what your nation of origin is. And I think it's really interesting, not in like a, ooh, this is a fascinating thing, but like kind of like in a terrifying way. um,
Low key
yeah,
terrifying.
low key terrifying way. But yeah, like I think that's something that the last few years has really highlighted. Like I think especially now with COVID and the United States kind of being put under a glass dome by the rest of the world, it's easy to forget that what we do here actually like ripples out to other countries. But like before COVID, at least, there have been a lot of examples of like bad decisions that we've made that have affected a lot of people overseas. And I think while it's nice to point fingers and laugh at the crumbling of the American giant, people also realize how disastrous this is for everybody.
Right. The
Yeah,
memes have been gold, but you know,
yeah,
the
exactly.
fodder for these memes is pretty tragic. um,
It's best to laugh through crying tears, right?
yeah, that's, I feel like where a lot of us have been at. I know for this fall when the 2020 election was underway, and especially the week of the election, it was hard to look away. It was hard to concentrate on schoolwork. I was constantly talking with friends and family about the election. I was constantly refreshing my news feed and worrying, just
Mm-hmm.
worrying and worrying. And I've
Yeah.
talked to other students who who had the same experience. No work was getting done that week.
No.
Everyone was really kind of glued to their TV, and I think that just kind of highlights what it's like to be a student during this time. I've had so many of my friends who have graduated say, "Wow, I'm so glad I'm not still in school." And I'm like, "Yeah,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
rub it in." It's a really hard time to be a student, because staying focused when the world feels like it's crumbling is really difficult.
Like in a sense, I'm kind of glad. I'm very glad actually. This might sound a little bit off at first, but I'm glad that all of like the Black Lives Matter protests happened when they did. First and foremost, because like then people could get involved because they don't have a whole cloud of schoolwork hovering over them.
Right, over the
Considering how many,
summertime.
yeah, considering how many young people were involved in those protests. Um, but I feel like really ever since the pandemic, there's been a lot of things that you've needed really all year. I mean, that's what 2020 is known for, the year of too many things. Um, where like you have to pay attention to everything that's going on because it does affect you, whether it's COVID, police brutality, no one has any money, the stock market crash, like everything affects you and it's exhausting. And I remember like just to that point of like not getting anything done the week of the elections. Since it lasted forever, like that entire week
Yeah.
really it was the longest Tuesday of my life. It ended on a
Yeah.
Friday, or
Yeah.
something. I remember
Yeah,
coming home.
definitely.
I was at my parents' place during the actual like beginning of the vote like counting, and it was so stressful, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to just go home because I need to get some sleep. And I get home and both my roommates have like in this room and in my other roommate's room where we had like the like what do you call it, the
Like a
vote
live stream
breakdown, and
or
like yeah, we had a live stream of vote total breakdown, a electoral map. We had like way too many things. Like I have two monitors here, he has two monitors, the other guy has two monitors. Like all of our monitors had a different screen up about the election, and then we were just jumping back and forth to each other's rooms
being
after we
like,
got
"Oh,
like
look at
this.
this. Look at this.
Yeah,
Oh, did you hear this? Have you seen this?"
like I just scream, "Hey, Georgia just flipped!" You
Yeah.
know. And then I remember I was really stressed out and I left. I just like went for a drive to just calm down and walk around like
And just like
downtown.
walk away from the screens for a second.
Yeah. And then I got home just expecting like, okay, I'll go out for like this drive. I'll go walk around the city for a bit, and by the time I come back, we'll know. Because it's still like really up in the air. Um, and came back, and Nevada still hadn't been called, and everyone was waiting for Nevada. And then it was like that for the next few days. And I remember just getting texts from everybody like, what do you think's going to happen? And just like, no one cared about anything else for that entire week.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet that week I had, papers due. I had, tests and things like that. Luckily, I will say some of my professors did. I don't know if it was entirely intentional or not, but it did seem a little bit lighter in some areas
Right.
with workload. And I think some of my professors were attempting to give us a little space and grace that week, knowing that not only were we going to be super distracted, but so were they. I mean, all of our
Oh, yeah.
professors were probably doing the same things we were.
Yeah.
And so having a little bit of grace there that week for each other was really good. But by no means did our lives as students like come to a screeching halt that week, because stuff was still due. Stuff was still expected. I was still writing papers and then like checking the news in between every other sentence, like, oh, and I've got my friends texting me, so I'm constantly texting my friends back and stuff. And just in general, just the whole year was already so chaotic because of the pandemic, and to also have that incredible tension building around the election, it was just so hard to walk away from. And when it was finally over and Biden was announced the winner, well, then it was being contested. And well, was it a legitimate election, and was it fair? And that has just rode right into the holiday season. And I know that many of you had probably a difficult time connecting with your family during the political turmoil. I know that I don't see eye to eye on politics with my family, and the way that we've always dealt with it is that we just don't talk about it. And I don't necessarily think that's the way we should go about it, but I recognize that with that tension being so high, and then also being a student, and also potentially going home, because the election was also happening right around the time the university kicked everybody out and told everyone to go home. So then you have the moving chaos, and the pandemic was still raging and really hitting its stride in its second wave. And and all of these things are occurring, and we're supposed to be studying for exams and writing papers and posting on discussion boards. And it was really, really challenging. And I see you and I feel for you. I'm talking to our listeners here, like it was really hard, and I know it was hard for me, and I recognize that. And I don't think that I don't know that people recognize what we're going through except for each other at this point as students. Most of the camaraderie I've had about how difficult it's been to be a student this year has come from other students who are going through the same thing as me.
And I think really this is the semester of unrealistic expectations, like very much so, because you're right. Like one of the things that I noticed, like during like the election cycle, was it was almost like an escape from like all of like the bullshit that you had to do at like school and living through the pandemic and stuff like that. It's like, oh, here's the elections. It's this high stakes. It's like a high stakes poker game. It's like, it's incredibly
it's the Super
terrifying.
Bowl of America.
Yeah. People are super passionate about it. No one can look away. And like there's like on election night, there's like a little moment where I'm like, ooh, this is like fun. Like watching like the numbers come in, and then you realize that no, this is real. This isn't House of Cards. It's not Game of Thrones. It's not
a football game.
It's not a football game. We're gonna have to live with the consequences of this night, or the next 4 nights, forever, and deal with it for the next 4 years. And like that's been a really weird thing to kind of come to terms with over the last year. It has been like the spectacle of the election and the spectacle of what modern politics is right now is incredibly fun to watch and incredibly terrifying once it kind of sinks in. And and we'll just say it, like we're recording this on January 9th, just a few days after rioters stormed the Capitol building. And I think that was a real, really put that on display that no, this is real life. This isn't just some show. It's not just like,
not a game.
it's not just arguing over Twitter or arguing on the debate stage or seeing Joe Biden yell at Trump on CNN and Trump respond
Hilarious
back.
memes.
You know, yeah, like, yeah, like it's, I don't know. Yeah, it really is real, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really scary. I felt like I was holding my breath that entire day when they were storming the Capitol. And I felt like there was gonna be a next moment. I thought the news was going to continue getting worse. When are they gonna start announcing death toll and things like that? And they did. It did
Yeah.
get worse. And so it was just a really scary time. And in a way, I'm glad that it happened during winter break. I'm not glad that it happened, but that it happened during winter break,
Yeah.
because for a moment something crazy was happening and I didn't have other homework assignments to
Yeah.
worry about the way
You
that
could
it
actually pay
has been
attention.
this whole like last few months. Exactly. I could pay attention to it or walk away from it. And I didn't have like also the pressure of school on top of me in that moment. But however, the inauguration of Joe Biden is on the 20th, which is just a day after the winter semester starts. And I'd be lying if I said I'm not worried. I'm
Yeah.
concerned about our elections being undermined. I'm concerned about the integrity of our democracy. And I do worry that the same feelings that fueled the attack on the Capitol could fuel future attacks as well, either on an inauguration day or just in general throughout the next 4 years. Um, I'm really hoping that the semester turns out well for us and for our listeners. And I want to extend my support emotionally as well and just say that the state of this country is fraught with chaos right now. And above all else,
Yeah.
you need to take care of yourself and your friends and your family. And your frustrations and your worries are valid. And I sincerely hope you can take a step back and breathe if things are becoming too much, as we've seen that they often have been lately.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm extremely worried about is people getting burnt out because, like I said earlier, 2020 is the year of too many things. Like there's been so many issues to care about. Like sure, you have the pandemic, then you had the primaries, which were a unique brand of shit show. And then you have the Black Lives Matter protests and all the police brutality stuff that was going on during the summer. You had the election itself. Now all of the election being rigged stuff, and I'm probably missing like 100 things in there that people have been extremely passionate about. But I feel like in an effort to get people to turn out to vote this year, me and June were talking about this a little bit before the podcast. People kind of have been viewing Trump as like Darth Vader in the sense that at the end of Star Wars, Darth Vader's defeated and then everything's happy. That's not really how anything works.
Right.
There's sure, we have a new president, new political landscape, all that stuff, but the same problems are going to be there and are still going to, need to be solved and need to have people who kind of stick up for them. And I'm worried that people are going to see Trump's loss and say, well, we did it. We beat the baddie. We can call it a day, pack up our things and go home. But really, a lot of the things that are going on now that have been issues this year are going to continue to be issues. Pandemic, I mean, we're in 2021 now. Pandemic's still going to be going on I'd be surprised if it's really over by the end of this year, even though we have like vaccines coming out. We're still going to be dealing with the medical implication of this for a while. And then that's not even considering like all the economic problems. Like no one in the city, no one here in Ann Arbor can actually pay for their rent anymore, which is terrifying. Student loans are racking up because no one has enough money to pay for anything. We still have, the same racial tension, same economic tension. There's a lot of things that still need to be fought for. And now is kind of the time, I guess, just to double down on that if those are things that you care about, and to not take this as a win, I guess, or celebrate it as a win, but also recognize that like there's it's not over.
Right.
But also don't burn yourself out. Like it's nice to
balance.
Yeah, it's nice to like be passionate about a lot of things, especially when they're like social issues or political issues or whatever. But if you're 100% passionate about every single thing in today's world, that's not gonna last. You're gonna get really disillusioned and really upset and frustrated. So just take it as it comes, but also pace yourself. I think that's really the takeaway from the last year of politics. And
yeah. And I want to agree with that too, of this idea that after the election, one side loses and one side wins and the game's over. And it's really, because it's not essentially a game. It's not the end of the road. I mean, maybe if the road goes on infinitely in both directions, like it's not the end. And we do have to double down on standing up for what we believe in now and in the future, regardless of who's president. And so while the election may have gone the way that you wanted or didn't, maybe it went the way you didn't want it to, now's not the time to just sit back and say, well, it's over. Because it still continues on from here. And recognizing that work that still needs to be done, but at the same time giving yourself the grace to be able to step back and say, like, I can't take on more. Being able to say no, I need to step away. That's really important, especially as we are students who are often not only studying but working, maybe taking care of our family. There's plenty of students who have children. There's so much going on, and while we need to stand up for what we believe in, we absolutely need to be able to take care of ourselves and focus on what's most important to us. And if you have to step back from things, that's okay.
Yeah. I think that's all we have time for today. Thanks for listening. Keep your head up as we go into this new, these next 4 years. It's going to be a bit of a ride either way, whatever side of the aisle you're on or whatever your personal beliefs are. I think the unique brand of chaos that's been started with the Trump presidency isn't really going to go away just because someone else is in charge. I think this is just business as normal now. Sure, we might not have as many headlines every week, but I think that we're still going to have our fair share of things to pay attention to and to have to keep our eyes open for.
Absolutely. If you're listening on YouTube, the link to the voter information page on the Michigan Secretary of State website is in the bio. So take a look at that if you do have questions about voting, if you're a first-time voter or perhaps want to learn more about the voting process. Stay strong and stay hopeful, and thank you for listening.
The Amplify podcast is supported by Optimize, an organization here at U of M that empowers students to be creative in how we serve each other and our communities near and far. To learn more about Optimize programming, please visit optimizemi.org. If you have topics you would like to hear discussed, let us know at optimizemi@umich.edu. Thanks and be well.